This year I've been reading a lot of writing craft books. I have an entire playlist for you if you want to check that out in the description box below. But as we're moving through 2020, I've been focusing a lot more on writer mindset and author business. If this is your first video of mine, hi, my name is Caitlin Duncan. I am a traditionally published author and soon to be hybrid author. I post videos on Mondays talking about the writing process and all the bookish things, so be sure to hit that subscribe button and the notification bell next to it so you know the next time I upload. And hit that like button if you're ready to talk about a series of books that have seriously changed my life. And I think they might change yours. Earlier this year, I found a series of books written by Becca Syme. This one is the first one, and the series is called the Quit Book series. Now stick around to the end of this video where I tell you how you can get this book for free. This year, I went through a serious writer's block, which I was unable to admit at the time. And due to lockdown, everything in my life changed, and I honestly didn't think I was going to ever write again because of all the overwhelm. And I do mention this in my most recent premise to publication video in which I talk about all of that fun stuff. So be sure to check that one out after this video. Now, from the time that I was suffering from this serious burnout and block, I had a lot of thinking time before I found this awesome series of books. And because I had processed everything, I fell into this series, not necessarily in burnout when I probably could have used them the most, but they did push me into a better and more self-aware mindset. Now, I started with Dear Writer, You Need to Quit, and I had some major takeaways. So the first takeaway is QTP, which is short for Question the Premise. And this has really been helpful me when it comes to my author career and my general life. There are so many different paths that authors can take throughout their career, and no one person can do all of them. As I'm moving toward indie publishing a series of my backlist titles, I've been really hesitant in how I am moving through this process because I am not starting these books from scratch. They are getting a bit of editing and then they're going to be put up on every book retailer platform. But then what? I have to start the process all over again, and that has been very overwhelming to me because of all the different advice out there from all of the successful indie authors. And according to more of the louder voices out there, the only way to be a successful indie author is to publish consistently on a rapid schedule. And when I say rapid schedule, that can range from to a few months in between books or even a few weeks. So I questioned that premise. I am not the type of person with the responsibilities I have in my life and the way that I write books to possibly release a ton of books a year. At my height of writing with a digital first imprint, maybe I published 2 books a year. It was a lot for me, and I couldn't even imagine an even faster schedule than I already did. So I thought, if I can't do that, will I ever be a successful indie author? And then I thought, have there ever been any successful authors who have written slowly? And then the light bulb went on. Of course there are. There are indie published and traditional published authors who publish books every few years, and they are blockbuster hits. Now, I don't have enough confidence in myself to say I will have a blockbuster hit, but I can be successful, and that is me questioning the premise. And I literally do it every day, whether I come across some advice from an author I admire or any other time during the day. And realizing that was a huge weight off my shoulders. Once I understood that, yes, this advice may work for some authors, but will it work for me? And realizing most of the time, no. And that realization was a massive weight off my shoulders when I understood that I should be questioning everything that these other authors are doing based on my own reality. The next takeaway I had was identifying strengths. Let me explain that a little bit. So Becca Syme is a Gallup certified Clifton Strengths coach.
Oh, what the heck does that mean?
Well, I'm going to tell you. Her methods of coaching stem from a knowledge of the Clifton Strengths themes, which are determined through a personality-like test. Now let me tell you how this is a little different different than some of the other tests that are out there. This test was created after a decades-long research on what successful people actually do. Now, at the point of reading this book, I had already taken this test and I have all 34 of my strength themes available to me. After I started digging into this process, I wholeheartedly believe in what she's doing to help writers. And knowing the order of your strengths themes offers ways on how you can improve your life and also when it comes to writing specifically. This test was not based for writers by any means, but Becca is unique in the way that she gears it toward writers. Now you may think,
I don't want to take some tests, I don't want to pay for this test.
And that's totally fine. Even though I highly recommend it, and I will recommend it the rest of my life, she does outline ways in this book on how you can determine your strengths without paying for the test. By identifying these strengths, I have been able to focus on what I'm naturally good at and have been in the process of creating a developmental plan to help me exponentially improve these strengths and become a better writer. Throughout this book, Becca does focus on things that you should quit when it comes to your writing career, such as quitting focusing on your weaknesses, quit setting expectations you can't quite meet, quit trying to be like everyone else, and so on. Now with these takeaways, how am I applying it to my life? I live my strength themes every single day. I have found more peace and happiness once I've identified and started to develop these strengths than I have in several years. I've questioned the premise on where my writing career needs to be based on me. And even though I am not technically a faster writer, I've actually slowed my process a bit, my output is so much better. In the writing community, we talk about refilling our creative well so you don't slip into burnout. And spoiler alert, we will be talking about burnout in a few minutes. Knowing my strengths, I can feel when I am drifting toward burnout, and I now know how to quickly get through that hurdle or avoid it entirely. And as I said, now that I'm questioning the premise, I do look at advice from other authors a lot differently. I have been so much more critical when it comes to accepting advice on what I should be doing, especially as I'm going into indie publishing. There's so much I don't know, but I'm learning to identify that icky feeling of resistance inside of me when I come across this advice. And I do question the premise. I look over my strengths and see if I could incorporate this advice into my life, and if I can't, I accept it and I move on. So is this book for you? Every writer should read at least one of the books in this series. I went into learning about Becca Syme through a mentor of mine who I trust their opinion entirely. Now, by no way am I selling you her coaching or taking the strengths test, but I do think Becca has a lot of good information in this book for writers, and if this is some information you can get on board with, awesome. If not, let's talk about another book in the series and see if I can get you on my side. The next book I'm going to talk about is Dear Writer, You're Doing It Wrong. One of the biggest takeaways for this book is the idea that people need to be well-rounded. Now, I grew up where it was encouraged to be a well-rounded person, which ultimately means that you're mediocre at everything. And who wants to be mediocre? As I mentioned with the strengths, once I found my natural abilities, I've created a roadmap for my author career and my life based on what I'm good at. Now, why would I want to take something I'm not good at and try to work really, really hard to make it better when I can basically 10x the things that I'm really good at? Now, I understood this concept in theory. I never was a person, especially in my adult life, that wanted to be well-rounded, but it really came through in this book. And as a parent, I'm always on the lookout for kiddos' strengths that I can naturally see and encouraging activities to promote them. The other topics included in this book were you don't need to write 12 books a year, which was definitely another eye-opener for me, which I did mention before, especially since my top strength theme is a strategic thinking one, where I honestly can't pump out my own books without giving them the proper space and time to really flourish prior to writing. You don't need to plot. While I am a plotter, I realize that there is a lot of advice out there for writers that's heavily based on plotting. Another natural strength of mine is appreciating and understanding the uniqueness of people, which is why I've restructured the way that I speak in a lot of my advice videos and offer what my process is, not as law, but as suggestions for something that you might want to try. Unless you get that resistance in your gut, and in that case, you can let it slide off you like I've let a lot of advice slide off me. But I do like to share my process as much as I can because I always enjoy seeing other writers' process. But again, if it doesn't work for you, just let it slide off and move on. You don't need to do it yourself. This realization took many, many years, and I like how Becca solidified it in this book. I have always been resistant to let other people do my work. I never thought that it was worth the money. I had a little bit of control issues, but a more specific example is ads. For years, I toyed with the idea of doing them myself. I even tried them myself, and I never really found it to work for me. Eventually, I gave up on it, and then I would keep seeing this advice about ads. Now, it's one of those things that I researched it enough that I knew they were important, but I didn't have the time or the money to be testing things out without really much knowledge for myself. So I found someone who is very good at ads, who loves the analytical details of them, and voila. Now, yes, this costs money, but I also got to a point where I was able to afford it, and I have seen this work for me so well over the past year. Now, this may extend to virtual assistants or hiring marketing managers for launches, but seriously, if you can afford the help to take these responsibilities off of you so that you are able to do higher value things within your writing career, I suggest you do it. You don't need to do it yourself. I told you how this book really affected me, but how can this book work for you? I feel that this book is for the overwhelmed writer, whether you are just starting out or looking for change. Again, with the amount of advice out there, they're usually catered toward that specific writer's strengths, whether they took the strengths test or not, but to their advantages. Like I said, when it came to ads, there are a lot of writers who are very analytical and really enjoy A/B testing, checking out new audiences, things like that. I don't enjoy that in the slightest. Like in Dear Writer, You Need to Quit, I questioned the premise and I found someone who could do it for me. Question that premise of what works for other people, and I guarantee you will be a lot happier. And as it says on the cover, if you want to be more efficient, effective, and better faster, I think this book is definitely worth a look. As I said with the next book, I avoided this one for a while. It's called Dear Writer, Are You in Burnout? Because I was in burnout and I just wasn't willing to accept it. I suppose when you are in burnout, there's a certain amount of pride there, and then saying the words might actually make it real. But once you admit it to yourself, then the healing can begin. So my takeaways from this book. One of the phrases that Becca uses frequently are energy pennies. And this metaphorical money is earned and spent doing different activities throughout your day. The more pennies you have, the better you will feel. The less pennies you have, the less better you will feel. It's sort of like watching your bank account fluctuate. And the spending of pennies depends on your natural strengths. For me, in some instances, I gain these pennies when I am reading or researching, and I spend them when I'm writing or editing. While reading this book, I really thought about when I knew I was in burnout several years ago when I was doing ghostwriting and also my own books. And at that time, I was doing all of the writing and all of the editing, and that's all I was doing in any of my free time. I was at no point replenishing my energy pennies vault. And then I would ignore it for months and months at a time and just keep pushing and pushing until I went in burnout. And then I would spend a week or two watching television and reading, and then I would suddenly feel better. I really love this part of the book because it was a great visual for me when I did look back on all those times when I felt good or bad, with pennies or at a loss. Now when it comes to burnout, this looks different for everyone, and Becca goes into detail with another great visual, which is plate size. There are some people who have naturally bigger plates, which is the capacity to juggle all of the things, while others have smaller plates. Now how does this play into burnout? Well, you have a plate and you fill it with too many things, what starts to happen? They fall off. And it's absolute chaos. There are a couple chapters in this book about plate size, and I really enjoyed determining how big my plate was. And she covers so many different types of people that you will definitely find yourself in this book. Even though this book hit a bunch of pain points for me, they did in the best way possible. It was as if Becca was a good friend of mine and she was really telling me to get my stuff together in a harsh but loving tone. The hardest chapter for me to read was The Pit. As Becca says in the book, the characteristics of the pit are lack of energy, extreme lack of willpower, lack of drive, and lack of retention. Earlier this year, I think I hit the pit for longer and I went a bit deeper than I had in any other previous burnout. It was literally as if I was a zombie just shuffling through my life. I had no purpose, no drive, and I really couldn't see any hope. This is why I appreciate these books and everything that Becca stands for. There's honest, real, and tangible advice in this book. Is this book for you? Even if you aren't actively in burnout or have never felt it before, lucky you. This book offers advice on how to spot the warning signs before you fall into the pit and steps on how you can actively work toward keeping your energy pennies replenished. So if you do slide toward burnout, you will be able to get out of it a lot faster. On to the next book. Dear writer, are you in writer's block? For years, I was that writer who told everyone I could that writer's block didn't exist. And now I'm happily going to tell you that my foot is firmly pressed inside my mouth. After discovering Becca and having daily conversation with writers who have taken their strengths test and have themes that are different from my own, I know there isn't one answer to any part of this process. I seriously had to question my own premise in this book, and Becca really put me in my place. To be clear, this book does not focus on writers who simply just don't have the discipline to write, so they don't, or those writers who dramatize the suffering parts of being an artist. And most of the time, they won't take your advice no matter what you say to try to help them. And some writers can be motivated by you telling them to sit down and write, but some aren't. There is a legitimate reason for a creative block, and this book can help you realize when you're in a block and how to get out of it. By the time I read this book, I had already overcome my burnout and my writer's block, but it really reiterated what I've learned so far about my strengths. And the advice within this book will really help me if I ever feel like I'm creeping closer to a block. Of course, again, Becca hit me with some hard truths and how sometimes writer's block is necessary. Mind blown. With another fantastic visual, she describes how in farming, fallow seasons for fields. And what that means is that this is a season that farmers do not grow anything on these fields, and it gives them a season to replenish all of the nutrients inside the soil. The length of these fallow seasons, if we're still going with this metaphor, can be different for different writers. And this is also what reiterated my realization that I am not going to be able to work on a rapid release schedule for my indie books. I need time in between books. I need to replenish my soil and all of the nutrients, and that's just the way it is. Questioning these systems that other writers talk about has been really freeing for me. And right now, I understand enough about myself that I know I won't be hitting a writer's block anytime soon. Why? Because I'm actively taking my strengths, my schedule, and my responsibilities and putting them against these systems that other successful authors use. These systems are not created in a vacuum, and they are based on what these authors are good at. And that was a big takeaway from all of these books for me. This book explores the signs of writer's block in great detail, along with myths of writer's block, such as you're not writing because you don't want it bad enough, and just write the book, or plotting your book will help, etc. Now, this blanket advice can be dangerous to give to another writer or accept for yourself because it's not tailored to the differences and nuances between writers. All writers are different and all of their processes are different. So is this book for you? Of course, you know I'm gonna say yes. I really enjoyed this. This was the latest book that I read, and it just reiterated so many things that I appreciate in different authors, and it also helped me with how I do give my own advice, whether here to you or to other writers I meet. And I think it's important to really dig into burnout especially, and also creative block, because they can seem overwhelming, or having the book available to go to when you feel this way will definitely help you get through these difficult processes. The next book in the series is called Dear Writer, It Is 2020, and it's coming out soon, and I'm so excited to dive in and read this one. As I mentioned before, you do have an opportunity to get the first book for free. I have a link in the description to a deal going on with Kobo. and they have a package of 4 ebooks that you can get for free, and this expires at the end of this year, so be sure to head over there right now and pick them up. In the comments below, let me know if you have read any of these books or are interested in any of these books. I would love to continue the conversation with you in the comments. If you enjoyed this video, do give it a like, hit that subscribe button and the little notification bell next to it so you know the next time I upload, and I'll see you soon.